shows up before something disastrous happens.
Interesting.
But the point with that and the Mothman is these things come and go. I've put a lot of thought into things like this, and John Keel, great paranormal researcher John Keel, had suggested that there are window areas all over the place where events of high strangeness tend to happen more than others, and that does seem to be the case. I wonder if maybe there are areas where the veil between worlds is a little bit thinner, and sometimes they overlap.
You mean, in other words, some of these creatures that we're seeing, like Mothman or our Dogman or whatever we're seeing, could be coming from another dimension, a portal into the earth or something, and who knows? It does make some logical sense, and maybe they can phase back into where they came from. That's why we can't find them. I mean, there's so many people trying to find Thunderbird right now. It's crazy. I ran across a forum page up on the internet where these people are really, in the Midwest, out trying to find the Thunderbird.
Well, with the Thunderbird, and you mentioned earlier the pterodactyl sightings. This is something people don't understand, is that the world isn't all explored. There are so many parts of North America alone that people haven't set foot on, or haven't set foot on for hundreds of years. They're complete wilderness in the United States and Mexico and especially up north into Canada. There are plenty of places for creatures to stay, for creatures to dwell, and up north the Thunderbird, the description of it, the size especially, it fits with the Teratorn. The Teratorn was a relative of a condor-like creature, but a lot bigger, with a wingspan of like 20 feet. And I mean, people. There's a story a few years ago of a pilot of a small plane in Alaska seeing something he thought was another plane flying next to him, and when he looked over, it was an enormous bird. There may be places out there like Alaska, like Canada, where these Teratorns survived the Ice Age, and there's not many of them, but they're hanging out, and the same with the winged dinosaurs. That maybe they're some places in the Mexican desert or in Texas where a number of them have been seen, to where they still live.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. Joe Taylor has been on my show. In fact, he's coming up, I think, in about a week or two again. Now, he has a museum in Texas, but he's the guy that the museums go to, if they got a broken bone from a dinosaur or is badly damaged, he restores it. I mean, he's been out for, 50 years looking for dinosaur, bones and all this stuff. And he's been all around the world. The last time he was on, James, didn't he say that they had some reports, even in Texas, of dinosaurs?
Yeah, and I was actually got a couple of reports, too, that in West Texas, there's been sightings of, for lack of a better word, Tyrannosaurus rex, only in a smaller version, a downsized version, which would make sense because of the oxygen levels. But there's been several sightings of those, and there's been some in Australia. But, yeah, there has been some in Texas. And also I've gotten a couple of reports, and I reported them, I think, last week about pterodactyl sightings in Massachusetts and Texas as well.
Oh, it makes you think.
Right. I mean, there are in my book, I list a number of pterodactyl sightings. There have been sightings in Kansas and Utah, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Hawaii, and that's just in the United States. And there have been numerous numerous sightings in Mexico, and to go even farther abroad, South America, New Guinea, and there's I'm trying to remember if it's Western or Eastern Africa, but there's a University of Missouri researcher who I interviewed a number of years ago, and the locals, when he goes over there to this one specific spot, talk of the Kogomato, and when he one time brought pictures of dinosaurs, they pointed to the pterodactyl and said that's the Kogomato. The jungles of Africa and South America are enormous. There's plenty of places for these things to live without human intervention.
Well, again, Joe Taylor swears up and down in Africa that he went into this one village. This is years ago, and he started talking to the elders, and then he explained that one of their hunters went out to, kill a pig, and he had a spear, and he saw a pig, and just as he was ready to throw the spear to kill the pig, a dinosaur, what do you call it? James, you remember what type of dinosaur it was? It was a
like a little Tyrannosaurus Rex,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it grabbed the pig by its mouth. He threw the spear and took off running. He naturally went back the next day. The villagers didn't believe his story that he saw, a monster, and they noticed a real foul smell. And then they came across the pig, which was still in the mouth of that dinosaur. And what was interesting that they had in this little village, and it was way out in the middle of nowhere, they had pottery of a T-Rex, painted into all this like pottery and all this stuff. Now, where would they get the idea what a T-Rex looks like?
Right, and there are examples of that all over the world. There are pictograms in that Native Americans had carved into rocks thousands of years ago of what looked like theropod dinosaurs, which is what the T-Rex is. In Europe, there were there's pottery. There's Greek pottery that's got what looked like a Patasaurus on it. There's on a temple in the middle of the jungle in India that has what looks like a Stegosaurus carved into the side of it. I mean, people didn't just come up with these. They look too much like what we know that dinosaurs most probably looked like. So yeah, where did they get that? In the 12 or 1300s in Spain, I had read a story that there was a dragon that was terrorizing this area, and people went out and drove the dragon away. But the description of it, was bigger. The body was bigger than an ox, and it had short, thick legs and a long tail. And a shield behind its head, and three, spears jutting from its face, and that sounds a lot like a Triceratops to me.
It does to me too.
Right. So this world's bigger and more more untamed than we think. So I mean, I don't know why dinosaurs. A small pocket at least couldn't have escaped, the extinction of most of them.
Well, like Joe is explaining to me and James and to the listeners, a lot of people think, the dinosaurs are still going to be big. Now, again, the oxygen level of our planet has changed drastically, back from the prehistoric days. So there's no way with our oxygen content level and all that it could support a huge dinosaur, but it could support ones that are quite a bit smaller. And he believes that, these are still going on. Just like, we're talking about dragons one night with him on there. And he clarified, he goes, the things that you heard, the stories and all the stuff that was passed down about dragons spitting out fire, that he said they weren't spitting fire out. They were spitting out an acid, which, they use to kill their prey, to, help dissolve the prey for they can, consume it. that is probably where dragons got, the term, like dragons spitting fire and all this stuff. They were spitting out a highly toxic acid.
Well, and dragons are another, something else fun really to think of. And, I'm not purporting that there are, there are dragons, there were dragons on the earth, but who knows? Because these creatures are named on every continent, where there have been people. They all have dragons. Middle America had the Piasa dragon. The natives spoke of it, that was intelligent and flew and would had scales and would scoop up people and animals. In Central and South America, we had the feathered serpents that were revered as gods. And Quetzalcoatl is one of them. There are dragon stories from Africa. The Aborigines in Australia have stories, and of course, the dragon stories from throughout Europe and Asia. They all behaved similarly. They were all generally intelligent. They had wings. They could fly. They had scales, and they could usually spit. Like you said with the fire, they could usually spit some sort of weapon. So, where did this come from that all of these ancient peoples had this same monster in their stories? Unless it was actually something like it was out there.
Well, if you heard it in one region only, or maybe 2-3 regions that connected to each other, is one thing. Or, before even ships, would travel the world. But there were reports going on long time ago of, dragons and all kinds of, monster type of creatures. But when you hear it in Ireland, you hear it in Scotland, you hear about it in England, you hear about it in Australia, South America, Argentina, United States, all through the year, even going back, it just tells me that I really think something was going on at that point. Because how would they come up with the same story, the same descriptions? And I think also Joe Taylor is saying he was at some medieval castle. And didn't he say even on the curtains, which were, hundreds of years old, there was pictures of like dragons and other type of, monsters on it, that unless they seen it, they wouldn't have been able to, to done it.
Yeah, he did say that. Another thing, and he said it and we said it too, and I've seen it also in different documentaries and reports, pottery that has depictions of, and a lot of it's in South America, of the natives with spears fighting, for lack of a better word, these dinosaurs. That's what's in the picture. And, it makes you think that these things just appear, where did they get this from? They don't have TV or none of that kind of stuff 100 years ago or 200 years ago when some of this pottery was made.
Oh, even now, like Joe said, last time he was in Africa, there was the fake pottery being made for, the visitors, but there was still some of the old pottery, the authentic stuff. And he's an expert in this stuff. And he said this stuff that was hundreds of years old still had pterodactyls and stuff on the pottery. So hey, I don't know. It's kind of scary. Hey, Jason, I hope you can hang on. We're going to go for break for the stations and all that stuff. Then we're going to come back, and then we're going to get in about your book. I want to ask you some questions like what made you decide to write this book. So go get a cup of tea, cup of Java. We'll be back, guys. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark. Check out the website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. And also check out Jason Offutt's page on the website. We'll be back.